Hello and welcome back, guys. We're now starting a new story, The UA Bounty Hunters. By Camdog 2. You can find author's profile link in the description. Let's begin from students. It was a bright and sunny afternoon at UA University. Classes had just been let out for the day, and for the most part students were heading back to their dorms to relax after another long day of classes. However, the exception to this were the hero courses, who for the first time in a while were all back at UA and preparing for the upcoming assault on the MLPF. Most of them anyway. This is starting to get old, Bakugu. Shota Aizawa grunted as he looked at his student, who started to growl. But since you didn't seem to listening, I'll repeat it once again. This time is going to be used working on formations and scenarios based on information we've got on enemies from the MLPF. Which means this training will be sorely for those that will be participating on this mission, which you are not. The eraser hero reminded his student, who snarled as explosions popped in his hands. F that. I need dash. Bakugu started to scream, only for Aizawa to activate his quirk and for his red eyes to glare coldly at his student. What you need is to learn shut up and accept things for what they are. Screaming like a brat and threatening people is what cost you in the provisional licensing exam. Aizawa cut off his student, who glared hatefully at the nobody in front of him. I had thought your time in general studies after the sports festival would have done you some good, but it didn't look to have done anything. Of course it didn't. Those worthless nobodies dash. Once again Bakugu started to scream, only for Aizawa to wrap him in his capture scarf. Those nobodies are some of the citizens you'll be expected to protect and save. Aizawa reminded the explosive boy, his tone now arctic. Even day one students would realize that, and that fact you still can't comprehend that this far into the year shows just how much you still have to learn. Aizawa lectured the student, who growled. Who gives a SHT about those extras? F rescuing and protecting them. If they're that incompetent, then they should just do everyone a favor and leave. Now. For the third time Aizawa interrupted the explosion user by wrapping his capture scarf around Bakugu's mouth. However, everyone was more focused on the dark look that covered the teacher's face. Mike, watch the kids, I'm taking this one to see Nizu. Aizawa told his friend, who nodded. Sir. Don't you think you're being a little too HRD on Bakugu? I'm sure he's just stressed and bummed out about failing the remedial courses. Maybe we can make him feel better by dash. Ichiro Kirishima tried to stand up for his friend, only for Aizawa to give him a blank look that killed his protest. Aizawa gave Mike one more nod before dragging Bakugu out of the gym they were practicing in. Ichiro signed sadly, watching his friend to being dragged out before turning around only to see Mina and Hanta looking at him with looks of annoyance. What's wrong, guys? He asked, with Mina sighing. Nothing, Kiri. She told him, only to brighten up when she saw Mei Hatsum entering the gym while pushing a cart covered with support tools. Hatsum. Mina called out, with Mei grinning. Hey there, Antlers. Anyone die yet? She questioned, with Mina giggling. Not yet. She answered before pointing towards the door. Though that might be because Mr. Aizawa took our explosive Pomeranian out for a walk. The acid girl giggled, with Mei nodding. Yeah, I saw that. Couldn't tell which of the two looked angrier. She said before looking around. Anyway, got something for Muscles that I want to. Ah, there you Muscles. Mei said as they turned to see Izuku Midoriya approaching them. He had a lean and muscular physique with hair that fell to the base of his neck. Surprised to see you here, Mei. I didn't think you ever left your lab. Izuku greeted her, with Mei smiling. You knew me well, Muscles, but I've got a new baby you've just got to try. Mei declared, with many of Class 1A taking a good number of steps back, with Izuku letting out a resigned sigh. Alright, Mei, let's see what you've got this time. Present Mike, having seen this, laughed to himself when his phone started to ring. Wanting to get some quiet, Present Mike stepped out of the gym for a split second before he answered it. 15 seconds later Mike was thrown to the ground as a deafening boom filled the area, as well as shattered all the windows nearby. Quickly shaking the dizziness off, the hero sprung to his feet and rushed inside, the kids his top priority. What B saw made his heart drop. The gym was in pieces, the ground reduced to rubble with the walls looking to be close to falling apart with several large holes littering the ceiling. With the students being nowhere in sight. Line break. It was a rush of color and sound that surrounded Izuku as a large amount of pressure weighed down on him. Whispers that came and went just as quickly as images blurred together that made things completely indistinguishable from each other. His haki going haywire as it tried to make sense of anything but to no avail. Finally and abruptly it came to an end and Izuku found himself on what appeared to be a tropical village. One that looked oddly familiar but Izuku couldn't quite place it. As he looked around he saw that Mei, Tokoyami, Mineta and Momo were with him, all looking around with various degrees of nervousness. "Where are we?" Mineta questioned with his legs shaking slightly. He asked with Momo tapping her fingers together. "I'm not entirely sure, though it doesn't appear to be anywhere close to UA. Though hopefully we're close to Japan," the heiress said, trying to hide her own concern with Tokoyami surveying their surroundings. "I'm more concerned about what brought us here," he muttered before looking towards Mei. "Could it have been one of your devices?" he questioned with Mei shaking her head. "Nope. My teleportation device isn't even out of the planning stages yet," Mei denied instantly. "Could it be another villain attack?" she theorized, sounding far less concerned than she should at such an idea. "Perhaps, but in that case we should," Momo started to say, only for Izuku to raise his arm. "Midoriya?" she questioned with Izuku keeping his eyes locked on the horizon. "We've got guest coming," he told his friends as his fiends tensed before preparing for a fight. Momo created a shield and staff combo as Dark Shadow emerged and Mineta took a couple of his hairball and even Mei took out a wrench from her pocket. Izuku stood in front, his fist raised and covered it in haki. The students stood ready to fight whatever threat was coming their way. Which is why when it was revealed that the newcomers seemed to be normal citizens, 4 out of 5 of the students lowered their guard. "Oh, thank goodness it's just a few citizens," Momo sighed in relief, lowering her weapons. "Ah, I wanted to fight." Dark Shadow whined before returning to Fumikage to sulk while said boy rolled his eyes at the quirk's antics. "I'll say. Hey Muscles, what do you want to do?" Mei questioned, only for Izuku to say nothing. "Muscles?" she questioned, but Izuku's mind was working too fast to even hear her as it tried to understand what he was seeing. Because what he was seeing should be impossible. The people in front of him couldn't be there. He had so many memories of them even though he had never met them. In this group there were 2 standouts. The first was an average-sized, dark-haired man with a thick mustache. His face shows a stern expression. He wore brown, short-sleeved uniform with sandals with a pinwheel in his hat. His most prominent feature were the scars that covered his body. The second is an elderly man with a wrinkled face, gray hair, gray eyebrows, and a gray mustache and goatee. He wears a bandana with a red cross and sunglasses. He wore a striped light green and dark green shirt under a doctor's coat with a red cross on the side of the right sleeve. The 2 men were having a whispered but heated argument, looking towards the students with fear and suspicion. This didn't help ease the nerves of the students as Momo stepped forward. Excuse me, but can you dash?" she began to ask, only for a gruff voice from behind them to interrupt. "Well, what do we have here? New subjects come to live in my territory." Turning around they saw a new group approaching them. 4 out of the 5 students seeing the group saw what they assumed to be a group of men, all with fish mutation quirks. Though Izuku knew better, and as reality was slowly starting to dawn on him what was really happening, he began to walk towards the newcomers just as the leader stepped forward as well. He was large, muscular, light blue man with a saw-shark appearance whose most distinctive trait is his saw-shaped nose. He has long, black hair reaching down to his shoulders and with a widow's peak. On his head, he wears a brown. He has a fin on his nape, surrounded by his hair, and his gills are located on both sides of his neck. A tattoo of the sun is on the left side of his chest, while another tattoo of a saw shark is on his left forearm. Other notable features include thin, fierce light blue eyes and a long, angular jaw. His attire is composed of fashionable, light clothes, reflecting his rich status as well as his background as a thug. He wears a short-sleeved, unbuttoned yellow cabana shirt decorated by many black lightning-like spots, green Bermuda shorts, a purple sash around the waist, and simple sandals. He also sports a lot of jewels. He has a golden chain bracelet around his left wrist and 2 golden bracelets around each ankle, with straw-like decorations hanging from them. On his hands are what appear to be rings, decorated by colorful gems, but Izuku knew them to be piercings. Izuku stopped moving when he stood between his friends and the fishmen in front of him while the sawtooth man stood directly in front of him. "Well, are you going to answer me, boy?" he questioned with a threatening smirk crossing his face that set the students back on guard. "Leave them alone, Arlong. They're just kids." The officer shouted at the now named Arlong, who shot the man an annoyed look. "Don't be a fool, Genzo, you've lived here long enough. The rules. 100,000 berry for adults and 50,000 berry for children," he reminded Genzo before looking over the students. "And they look like young adults to me. So that's gonna be 500,000 berry, or at least that's what it would be had it not been for those," he said, pointing towards Momo's shield, sword, and even Mei's wrench. "Weapons are not allowed for any reason," he told the students. He did take notice of Dark Shadow though. Devil fruit powers. He thought briefly before looking at Fumikage. Zoan probably. He dismissed before returning to the matter at hand. "Normally that would be a death sentence, but since you appear to be new here, I'll let you off with a simple fine of 1 million berry each," Arlong said, charging all of them despite only 2 of the group being guilty of the crime. "So altogether that's 5 million berry. All to be paid immediately, of course," Arlong demanded as raised his hand to accept the money. His goons behind him started cackling while the villagers erupted into outrage. "That madness, you monster! How do you expect them to dash?" The doctor shouted, this time only to flinch back as Arlong shot him a dark look before giving Izuku a nasty smirk. "Well, boy, what's it going to be?" he questioned while placing his hand on Izuku's shoulder. Once contact was made, it was confirmed that this wasn't some messed-up trick and was now indeed their reality. It took 3 seconds for Izuku to fully accept this. In contrast, it only took 1 second to bury Arlong face first, up to his knees in the ground. Line break. Never in a million years did Mina ever think that she wouldn't enjoy a sudden trip to a tropical island, but lo and behold, here she was trying not to lose it as they tried to figure out where they were. Along with her was Denki, who was looking more than a little twitchy and glancing around nervously as if expecting an attack, which given their history was understandable. Also with her was Mizo, who was busy surveying the island. He had already confirmed the rest of the class was still on the island, and luckily there were multiple towns on the island, with them heading towards the nearest town. Ijiro was also with them, his gaze sharp and his arms already hardening as if expecting a fight. Siro had also been with him but was currently scouting ahead for either anyone that can help or maybe even find out who brought them here in the first place. The 4 remaining students continued on their way to the nearest town with Denki groaning. "Man, why does this CRP always happen to us?" Denki whined as he created a spark between his thumb and index finger. "It seems like no matter what happens, we're always getting caught up in some kind of CRP." He vented to his friends, who let out their own grimaces. "Yeah, an image, what's going on at UA? They're probably on lockdown by now. And we just got the rest of the student body off our backs." Mina joined Denki in complaining before an irritated look crossed her face. "Monoma is gonna have a field day with this." She rolled her eyes, already imagining what the copycat was going to say about all this. "I'm more concerned about how we're going to get back home." Mizo voiced his own concern as they walked. "From what I can tell, we're not anywhere near an airport," he told them, not seeing or hearing any signs of an airplane. Ijiro, despite his nerves, just grinned. It'll fine, bro. We also figure these things out." The redhead reassured his fiends, only to them frown. "Wish Bakubro was here though. He'd definitely know what to do," he told them while missing the dry looks his friends exchanged. All of a sudden Mizo stopped walking and all of his eyes widened. Incoming! He shouted before leaping into the air and catching something that barreled into him. Denki, Mina, and Ijiro all gasped in horror when they saw Shiro breathing heavy in Shiro's arms, his helmet completely destroyed and the rest of his hero costume already stained. What happened to you, Shiro? Mina asked with the tape user gasping as he answered. Don't know. He wheezed. 1 second I was swinging through the tress, the next something slammed into me and sent me flying. Shiro managed to get out as Mizo repositioned him. Try not to move, Shiro. We'll get you to Midoriya and he'll fix you up, the multi-armed boy promised the tape user. I'm afraid that's not gonna happen. The declaration came from the same direction Shiro came flying from. From there came a muscular, blue-skinned man that resembled a smelt whiting and has thick lips. Are you the one that did this to Shiro? Mizo questioned with the older man saying nothing before looking over the rest of the group with a mix of disgust and disinterest. Though when his eyes landed on Mizo a flash of betrayal and rage briefly appeared. If you're referring to that miserable-looking pest in your arms then yes it was me. The villain admitted quite easily. Why, what did he ever do to you? Ijiro demanded only for the smelt whiting man to sneer back. Watch your town with me, human. Otherwise I'll blow off your head. The older male warned the red-headed who hardened on instinct. Raising an eyebrow but not dwelling on it he answered. As for why I attacked him, why shouldn't I have? He's only a human and it didn't look like he had the money to pay Arlong's fee, so that means his life like the rest of the humans is completely worthless. The walking smelt whiting sneered towards Mina, Denki and Ijiro. Along with traders who side with humans over their fellow fishmen. The now identified fishman told the students who were growing more and more concerned. The way this guy talks about fishermen and humans. He's clearly a mutant type, so why is he talking about them like they're separate species? Did we stumble across some kind of mutant cult or something? Mizo thought to himself before he asked his next question. You mentioned a fee before. The multi-armed teen stated with the older male nodding. So you are new here. We'll be kind enough to explain. This archipelago is controlled by Arlong the Saw and there's a monthly charge of 100,000 berry for every adult and 50,000 berry for every child. To be paid every month without exception. Those that can't are killed, no exceptions. The man explained. The students were gasping in horror at what they just learned. They had no idea what a berry was, but what they clearly understood the rest of what the villain in front of them said, and it sickened them to their cores. That's awful. How could this Arlong guy allow this? Mina demanded with the fishman giving a rather cruel smirk. What? You expected a pirate to be nice? He questioned with Ijiro blinking. Pirate? He had to ask with the villain rolling his eyes. Yes, pirate, you stupid human. Arlong the Saw, captain of the Arlong pirates to be exact. He spoke with pride before pointing to himself. And I choose serve as one of his top officers. Chu told them before narrowing his eyes. And now I will serve as your executioner. That was the final straw for Ijiro, who shot forward activating his unbreakable form shot towards Chu, followed quickly by Mizo, who had set Shiro down and rushed the fish man as his arm formed into a giant fist. Red Gauntlet. Octospansion. The two attacks landed with Mizo slamming his enlarged fist into the Chu's fist face and Ijiro hitting the man in the stomach. Mina and Denki cheered seeing their classmates' attacks land. Oh yeah, get them guys. Denki laughed, sure the villain was toast from taking 2 super moves. However, all their excitement died when instead of being blasted away he was only knocked back a few meters. Chu simply clicked his tongue and in the blink of an eye was back in front of them. Before the two teens could even react, Chu backhanded Kirishima away before kicking Shoji in the stomach, knocking the wind out of him. He hits harder than Rappa. Ijiro thought, shocked that a simple backhand could hurt that much. Chu was prepared to finish them off when something splashing on and covering him with an agonizing burning sensation covering his body. Chu screamed in pain as he tried to wipe it off, but the substance was thick and plentiful. Glaring darkly, he turned to Mina, who had a glare of her own, her hands together ready to fire more acid at the villain. Miserable human! He roared before taking a deep breath. However, he was so distracted he didn't notice something wrap around his leg until it was too late. What the? He questioned, looking down. Is that tape? He questioned before followed where it led to. He saw Zero up, and although he was panting he managed to pull his elbows with enough force that with help from the acid on the ground caused him to lose his place and fall face first into the acid, doing more damage. It was Denki's turn now, and after charging electricity into his hands fire multiple lightning bolts at Chu's head, sending bolts through his body. Come on, just stay down. He grunted as he watched the villain slowly getting to his feet. Luckily Mizo and Ijiro were back and proceeded to kick the fishman off the road and into the woods surrounded them. Kick after kick the two delivered towards the fishman, no real destination in mind, just wanting to make sure the fishman went down. However, in a brief second that Chu was facing them, he managed to fire off a shot of water with the speed and power of a pistol. Mizo narrowly dodged the shot and the two teens jumped back in caution. That allowed Chu to regain his bearings and realize he was in a marsh. Grinning triumphantly, he looked over towards the two students. Game over, traitor. Human. He roared in glee before bending over and starting to drink the water. Mizo and Ijiro watched as Chu began to bloat and expand like a balloon. Denki. Get your butt over here now. Mizo shouted in a panic as Chu got bigger and bigger as the water level got lower and lower. That's when the glacier appeared. Even though it was miles away, the block of ice was massive enough to be seen from where they were. Its appearance was enough of a shock for Chu to spew out the water he had taken again and sent the fishman into a coughing fit. What the hell could have done that? Chu demanded, with Mizo and Ijiro both gaining. You're a lifesaver, Todoroki. They both thought as Denki finally made it there. You guys see that? He questioned with both his friends nodding. Yeah, we do, and it bought us the time we needed. Shoji said before pointing at Chu, who was still standing in the marsh. Now go on and finish him off. Mizo said, getting a grin from the electric boy. Leave it to me. Denki told them before walking up the edge as lightning covered his body, with Ijiro and Mizo giving the teen some space. Now indiscriminate shock, 2 million volts. He declared as the area was lit up with lightning. This lasted for several seconds until finally they could see Denki swaying there, his brain short-circuited, but he was still standing. The same could not be said for Chu, who was floating through the marsh, twitching and unconscious, lightning still sparking off him. Hey, you guys okay? Mina called as she helped Zero over towards them. We'll be fine. Mizo promised her. For now we need to meet up with the others. Mizo reminded his team before using his quirk to survey the island. The sounds of fighting could be heard from all around them, with their classmates at the center of all of them. Come on, the closest group is this way. He told the group as they rushed off to help their friends. None of them paying any attention to the blue-haired young woman who stood there frozen at what she just witnessed. Line break. Shoto let out a mist-filled breath as used his fire to warm himself up. Around him were Jairu, Satu, Ida and Ojiro fighting together against the villains who called themselves fishmen as they fought in a destroyed town. Satu was their frontline fighter, his enhanced strength being just enough to stagger them for Ida and Ojiro to knock out, while Jairu played defense and mid-range support. Todoroki himself was focused on the glacier he just created, which entombed many fishmen at once, with the fire and ice user keeping his eyes locked on the only fishman that had managed to dodge it. He has the typical appearance of a martial artist with a dark blue gi and a black belt. His hair is tied into a straight ponytail. His sun tattoo is on the right side of his chest. This was Kurubi, an officer in the Arlong pirates and a rayfish fishman. Kurubi was glaring daggers at the teen. Miserable human. He snarled before charging forward, ready to strike with his large elbows. Shoto jumped backwards and created a wall of ice which the fishman slammed straight through and got a face full of fire. which soon covered his entire body. The rayfish fishman roared in pain before rushing and slamming head first into the ice, which immediately started to melt due to the flames, and thanks to the amount of ice the flames were quickly extinguished. Kurobi couldn't get too comfortable though, as spikes of ice were suddenly piercing several points of his body. Flexing his muscles enough to break the ice, he tuned and watched as Shoto got closer and closer, fire covering his left side. "You worthless little insect!" Kurobi roared as he rushed towards the boy, his fist raised to kill the brat. 100 tile true dash. Flash fire dash. Punch. Fist. Both declared their attacks as they slammed into their fist into each other. Shoto grit his teeth as he felt the bones in his arms shattered before the force behind the blow and being launched back. However, Shoto kept his eyes on the fishman as he was bathed in flames, with something zooming past Shoto and blitzing behind Kurobi. "Finish him off." Ida, Shoto though, as the armor-clad teen leapt into the air and delivered a powerful kick directly to the man's head, sending him into the dirt before landing once more kick. "To finish him of Kurobi." A couple of the fishman shouted in horror as they watched one of their top officers fall. They then screamed out in pain as Jiru's jack stabbed into their neck as the girl ran her heartbeats into them. "Great work, Ida. Todoroki." She praised him with a grin. As Sato and Ojiro took down more and more fishmen. "Yeah, you guys rock." The sugar-powered teen exclaimed, with Ida and Shoto nodding in thanks. It took another minute or so, but the rest of the fishmen were defeated and the students were trying to catch their breath. "How's your arm, Todoroki?" Sada questioned, with Shoto grimacing as he held his damaged arm. "Midoriya can heal it easy enough, but until then it looks like I can't use my left side at the moment," he announced, with the irony of the statement not being lost on anyone. "The question is now, where is everyone else?" Ida questioned, with Jiru sticking her jacks into the ground. "Looks like they are 3 other groups, with one of them already on the move," she announced before pointing toward her right. "They're heading to the group that's over in that direction," she added. "And which direction is the last group in?" Jiru pointed straight behind her. "Then that's the direction we're heading in," Ojiro announced as Sada placed Shoto on Ida's back despite the former's protest. "Well then, Class 1A, let's head out," Ida cried as they ran to go find and help their friends. Line break. "Wow. So you guys were at your school and suddenly you're here, how'd that happen?" Hachan the octopus fishman questioned in disbelief. Hachan, being an octopus fishman, has 8 appendages, 6 arms and 2 legs, and an octopus-like face. He has pink skin and gray hair styled into 5 spikes. He has a muscular build and suction cups on his 6 arms, which he can use to cling on to walls. Hachan has a tattoo in the shape of a sun on his forehead. He lacked the web hands most fishmen have. He wore heavy clothing and shirts made especially for octopus fishmen. Right now was sitting down in the center of Arlong Park with Tsu, Ochako, Yuga, Toru and Koda, who had just explained to who they figured was a kind octopus mutant. "It's definitely strange, but honestly we've been through worse." Tsuyu shrugged her shoulders, having been in far worse situations before. "I just wish we knew where we were." "What did you call this place, Hachi?" "The Konomi Islands." "Where is that exactly?" Ochako questioned, having never heard it before. It didn't help ease their worries that they didn't have any cell phone service. Hachi, however, blinked in confusion. "How can you be here and not know where here is?" he questioned, with Tsu tilting her head. "We were teleported here, remember?" The frog girl questioned, with Hachi nodding while bumping 3 of his fist into his other 3 palms. "Oh, that's right," he exclaimed. "Anyway, the Konomi Islands are located in the East Blue," he said, only furthering their confusion. Ochako was just about to question exactly where the East Blue was when the iceberg suddenly appeared, scaring the CRP out of everyone. Was that Todoroki or Midoriya? Toru questioned, knowing those two were the only ones capable of that in their class. "Todoroki. Midoriya. Those are your fiends, right?" Why would they be creating icebergs? The octopus questioned with Yuga frowning in concern. They're probably fighting right now. Someone powerful most likely. The most stylish of Class 1A suggested. Fighting. That means we've got enemies on the island. Come on, let's go find our friends and start fighting. Hachi announced, grabbing his 6 swords and heading for the gate with the 5 UA students right behind him. That's when the ringing started. All 6 of them stopped, with the students looking towards the octopus, placed a sword and reaching into his shirt and pulled out what looks like a tiny snail. Arlong. He questioned before pressing something on its shell. Hello Hachi. Are you there? A voice cried as the snail burst into tears. A talking, crying snail. Koda cried out in wonder as Hachi answered. Yes, this is Hachi. What's going on? Where's Arlong? He demanded, with the voice on the other end whimpering. He's gone, fighting some kind of monster. He cried, and behind the voice the sounds of battle could be heard. What? A monster did this? Is it here to help villagers try to rebel? He demanded, not noticing the glances, the looks of suspicion coming to the faces of the students. What did he mean, villagers rebelling? It has to be. It was some new guy with dark green hair. One punch and he was in the ground, and when he got back up, bam, another punch and both were gone. The fishman cried. That was definitely Izuku, and he's fighting the boss of the guy in front of them. There was a flash and we went to investigate. There were 5 of them, and after a few seconds of talking, bam. Arlong in the dirt. Hachi blinked at the new information before glancing suspiciously over at the UA students before replying. Well, a group of teens appeared in a flash here too. Hachi revealed as the snail's eyes went wide. Kill them, Hachi. Kill them right, RCK. The line went dead and everyone just stood still as a tense silence weighed on each of them. Hatch dash. A twitch was all the warning they got before Hachi spun, and after tossing the snail aside, darted forward with all 6 of his swords pointed towards them. Yuga fired his laser directly towards the fishman, only for the blades to deflect the laser with his sword. Unfortunately for the fishman, the laser was directed directly towards Toru, who redirected the laser and letting it slam into one of the fishman's arm, forcing him to drop the sword. Tsu meanwhile grabbed Yuga with her tongue and dragged him out of the way as Ochako went low as she darted towards Hachi. Gunhead martial arts won't work here. I just need to take away his center of gravity and Tsu can finish him off. She thought before diving under a slash from the pirate and managed to tap the pirate's leg. Release. Hey, what's going on? Hachi cried as he started to float higher and higher into the air. Grab him, Tsu. Ochako cried as Tsu wrapped her tongue around his waist. This turned out to be a mistake, however, as Hachi grabbed the tongue with his free hand and pulled her up to him, and then after dropping a sword punched the frog girl directly into Arlong Park. Tsu. Toru cried, though had no time to worry about her friend, as Hachi, after turning around, unleashed a blast of ink from his mouth that sent him hurtling towards the ground. The students had to dive out of the way in order to avoid getting hacked apart from Hachi, who flew past them. Ochako quickly brought Hachi back down to the ground by cancelling her quirk, allowing Hachi to land, and with immediately charged towards the students. He was blindsided by Tsu, who leapt from the hole she made in the building and kicked him square in the head. This forced Hachi to drop another one of his swords, so he only had 3 left, and caused him to stumble. Seeing their chance, Ochako, Koji, and Toru each slashed him with a sword, causing him to gasp in pain and allowing Yuga to hit him point blank with a laser, sending him straight into the wall. Did we get him? Toru questioned, with Yuga holding his stomach as he tired to peer through the dust. It appears we have. He answered, only for a trumpet-like sound to come from where Hachi landed. A few seconds later the ground started to shake violently as Hachi emerged from the hole in the wall. You guys did it now. Let's see how you deal with Momo. He laughed as something from the water emerged and the heroes gasped in horror. It was a giant sea cow with a seal-like structure, with a height of 36 meters, 118 feet 1 inch feet, and weighing 16 tons, 32,000 pounds. He has a big, round nose with a gold nose ring, cow-esque face, horns, and green spots throughout his body and fins with retraceable claws. Momo roared at the humans and was about to devour them when Koji ran forward. "Please stop my appealing friend." The animal lover cried, and to their amazement Momo actually listened. Hachi was shocked to say the least. "Momo, what are you doing?" Hachi demanded, but the sea cow wasn't paying him any attention as Koji kept talking. "Please help us stop this villain from causing any more pain and destruction." Koji pleaded, and instantly Momo turned, glared and roared at the terrified fishman. "Wait, Momo. I dash." Hachi was cut off by Momo, who had swiped at fishman with such force it sent him flying through the air and over the horizon. The students started dumbfounded at the twinkling in the distance. "Well, I guess we won." Toru cheered even though there was uncertainty in her voice. "Yeah, honestly, I was Mina." Ochako cried, seeing their alien-looking friend who rushed up to her. "Oh, thank goodness you guys are holy sea cow." Mina cried, seeing Momo, who tilted its head towards the group in curiosity. Ochako however frowned in concern at seeing Siro. "It looks like you guys had some trouble as well." She frowned with Denki snorting. "No more than you guys." He fired back, seeing the blood dripping down Tsu's head. "Well, we came here in case you guys needed backup. It looks like you have it under control," Ijiro said, looking around. In response to this, Koji smiled as he gestured to Momo. "It's all thanks to Momo. He's the one who finished the fight by sending the villain flying." The animal lover praised the animal who preened under the praise. "Regardless of who won the fight, it looks like there's only one fight still going on," Mizo informed them with Denki pumping a fist. "Well, what are we waiting for? Let's go help our pals." Denki cheered, which was soon joined by the rest of the students. And with one last goodbye to Momo, the group rushed off to the final battleground as hoping to meet up and figure out just what was going on. Line break. Genzo, did that really just happen? That was the question that was going through everyone's minds as they stared at Arlong upside down and buried up to his legs like it was the strangest thing in the world. "Unless we all just saw the same hallucination, I think it did." The sheriff answered, though his tone displaced the same disbelief he was sure the rest of the residents as well as the pirates felt. Whispers and murmurs were exchanged as Neko spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "Say, Genzo, is it possible that, is there the slightest chance that we could actually dash?" He trailed off, not daring to actually speak the words. Genzo didn't answer immediately, just watched as the young man who landed the blow on Arlong crack his knuckles before turning to his fiends. He told the raven-haired girl something. She seemed to hesitate, but the green-haired teen was insistent on something. The girl ended up relenting and from her chest pulled two high-tech looking guns before handing one to the pink-haired girl, who nodded at something she was told. He faced the shortest of the group, who despite shaking with nerves managed to give a nod, allowing the boy to turn to the bird-headed teen, who gave a nod with the shadow creature giving a thumbs up. The teen seemed to be done planning, and just in time too, as the ground started to shake violently before it burst apart and Arlong was back on his feet and was glaring at Izuku. "You worthless dash." The saw-toothed fishman was cut off as Izuku gave him a brutal uppercut that sent him hurtling into the air and out of sight. This finally snapped the fishmen out of their funk as with a roar they charged to the strangers. "Go Dark Shadow!" The bird-headed teen ordered, with the shadow charging towards, with the shadow intercepting 5 of the fishmen. They seemed to be deadlocked for a moment, with the shadow being pushed back slightly. However, with a mighty yell the shadow increased in size and allowed it to overtake and defeat the pirates. Boom! 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 The sound of gunfire turned the audience towards the girls, whose gunshots seemed to be exploding on impact and knocking the fishmen off their feet. It didn't kill them unfortunately, but it did render them unconscious, which was enough for now. As for the shortest of the group, he was quick, plucking the ball of his head and throwing them towards the fishmen. They didn't all land, but those that did stuck to the fisherman's body. The pirates, too distracted, didn't even notice them at first and only started to pay attention when they found themselves only able to move thanks to them stepping on the orbs. It became even more difficult when they started to bump into each other, causing them to stick together and easy pickings for the others. This was especially unfortunate for those who were stuck in place, as they were unable to be knocked back and take the full brunt of the attack. For a moment the citizens panicked when they saw a fisherman in the back talking on a transponder snail, but he didn't get to say much before the shadow creature slammed into them and cut the connection. Slowly something started bubbling up in his gut, a feeling that had been absent for years but now seemed to be slowly but surely starting to blossom in his heart. It actually made him a bit giddy as he clutched his chest. This feel, how long has it been since I had last felt this? 6 years. 8 years. I can't remember the last time, but it's a feeling I had never thought I'd feel again. He thought as he wiped the tears that threatened to fall from his eyes. The feeling of hope. Line break boom. Arlong slammed into the ground within a fiery explosion as Izuku assaulted the pirate with a landmine punch that sent the fishmen barreling into the ground. Arlong snarled as he shakily got to his feet and spat out the remaining teeth of his current set, with new ones growing a few seconds later. That worthless little human. Arlong thought as he tried to regain his breathing. When I get my hands on him, I'll tear the flesh from his bones. He swore in his mind as his mind went over all the ways he wanted to kill the green-haired human. A shining light off to his side, however, drew all thoughts of revenge from his mind as a cold dread washed over him. It can't be Dash. He thought, quivering slightly as his mind flashed back to that dreadful day. Arlong covered and struggled to set up as a man in a gray suit and fedora stood above him smoking a cigarette as one of his fingers started to shine. It can't be. Arlong thought furiously as he shook his head. There was no way that light BSTRD was here in the East Blue, not a chance in hell. He kept trying to deny, only for several beams of light to shot through them. Arlong was shaking from the pain as Izuku warped right in front of him, delivered a hockey-powered punch that completely shattered the fishman's jaw. Izuku wasn't relenting, however, and slammed the pirate into ground before dragging along the ground for several dozen meters before lifting him up and using the power of the strong fruit tossed him high into the air. Arlong's flight was cut short when Izuku wrapped right behind him and deavleered another strong punch, sending back to the ground. Only for Izuku to once more warp and face Arlong back into the air once more. And so began Izuku's own personal game of ping-pong with himself, with Arlong acting as the ball. However, Izuku wasn't satisfied with just a normal back and forth and instead started adding special kinds of returns. Lightning, earthquakes, explosions. Izuku added all kinds of enhancements to his punches. It wasn't long before the entire archipelago was watching the exchange with their mouths wide in disbelief at what they were seeing. None more so than an orange-haired young lady who seems to be in a trance as she watched the pirate captain getting brutalized until she finally managed to snap out of her trance and race towards the scene. The game finally came to an end when Izuku warped back to where the two first meet up. Midoriya, is everything all right? Tokoyami questioned, with Izuku nodding as he raised his arm into the sky. Don't worry. Izuku told his friend as Arlong landed straight on Izuku's hand. Crack, just finishing up. Izuku announced, tossing the fishman off his hand, with Arlong landing on the ground unmoving. Looking around, he saw the other fishmen bound and unconscious. Nice work, guys, fishmen aren't easy opponents. He praised his classmates. Thank you, Midoriya. Momo told him before glancing at Arlong. Is he still alive? She had to ask, with Izuku snorting but nodding. Yeah, he's still alive, but believe me, I wouldn't lose any sleep if he wasn't. Izuku admitted, with Momo flinching. Izuku was rarely this violent, but when he was, it was never good for whoever made him like that. So you guys are done too? Turning, they saw Todoroki's group approaching them. Yeah, just finished up. Mineta told them, throwing ball onto Arlong to ensure he won't go anywhere. Looks like you guys ran into some trouble. Izuku noted, seeing them each with some bruises along with the fact Ida was carrying Todoroki. It's nothing Midoriya can't fix. Shoto reassured as Izuku already gathered water from the air and sending it over to Shoto, covering his broken arm as it started to grow yellow. The fire and ice boy let out a sigh of relief as he felt his arms start to heal. Meanwhile the natives of the archipelago were as still as statues, each afraid of that if they did the illusion in front of them would shatter and reality would come back. It wasn't until he heard someone call out to him that the sheriff moved. Genzo. A soft voice practically squeaked and the shelf closed his eyes and turned to meet the one who spoke. Nami. Nami's movement was slow as she placed one foot in front of the other as she approached. Her gaze never left Arlong's unmoving form. So fixated on it that she didn't notice the looks of growing jubilation, glee and pure happiness that slowly started to break onto everyone's face as tears started to fall. Nami kept on walking. Is this real, Genzo? Her voice trembled and broke, clutching the man's arm while shaking violently. The older man just pulled her close into a hug. Yes, Nami, it's real. He confirmed, trying hard to keep his own voice steady. We're free. We're finally free. He announced as his voice cracked at end with these behind him finally erupting into cheers. It's over. Arlong is gone. We can live in peace again. Already they had begun to celebrate, with some already rushing off to spread the word of the tyrannical pirates' defeat. Nami was still crying as Genzo held her. Who was it? She questioned, seeing a group of people that looked only a year or two older than her. The green-haired one. Neko informed her as he pointed towards Izuku was talking with his friends. I see. She muttered as she started heading towards him with the two men blinking in confusion. So does anyone here know what the hell is happening here? Mineta questioned, getting a sigh from Izuku. I think I do, but I'm praying I am wrong, he admitted, making his friends nervous. And why is that, Midoriya? Ida asked, with the green-haired teen letting out a tired sigh. Because if I'm right, the only way back would be a near-suicidal ordeal, making us the enemy of the entire world, and would take us a minimum of 2 years to actually pull off, all the while performing actions that pretty much go against everything it means to being a hero. Izuku admitted, not enjoying the looks of horror that covered the faces of his classmates. Even Tokoyami and Todoroki seemed too close to panic. However, before they could ask any more questions, Nami had reached them, and upon seeing her, Izuku stood. Yes, is there something I can help you with? Izuku asked, despite knowing DMN well what she wanted. You're the one who did this to Arlong? She questioned, getting a nod from Izuku along with the others who saw it. Well, in that case, she said before pulling him tightly and clinging to him with all her strength. Thank you. She said finally, and fully breaking down, sobbing into his shoulder. Izuku gently embraced her as he hugged her back and rubbed her back soothingly. I don't know how we're going to even begin thanking you and your fiends. Genzo said, finally approaching them along with Neko. Izuku just gave the men a smile. We're bounty hunters, sir, we were just doing our jobs. He said, ignoring the startled looks he was getting from his friends, which thankfully went unnoticed by the two men in front of them as well as the rest of the remaining townspeople. Just point us towards the nearest marine base so we can drop off Arlong and his men, and we'll call it even. Genzo and Neko were all too happy to agree to that. They couldn't care less who these youngsters were. They were the heroes of Kokoyashi, that's all that mattered to him. Guess now all that's left is to round up the remaining of the fishmen. Neko muttered, not losing any of his joy, knowing that it was only a matter of time before each of them was taken down. There's no need for that. The rest of the team has already dismantled the Arlong pirates. Izuku promised, having used the glare fruit to examine the full island before frowning slightly at not finding Hachi. Wasn't the worst thing in the world, but he needed to make sure the fishmen wouldn't cause problems for the archipelago anymore. This caused another round of cheers from the citizens. It's time to celebrate. A man cheered. A party to celebrate our freedom and to honor our saviors. A woman added, with the crowd's cheering got even wilder as they rushed forward, embracing their saviors and leading them to the closet village to begin the celebrations, while ignoring the students' objection that they didn't need to do this. Izuku just smiled and went with the crowd as Nami, still holding him by the hand, lead him. Inside, however, his mind was already hard at work making plans, backup plans, examining every option that he could possibly make things easier. But despite everything, Izuku knew one thing for sure. The challenge he and his friends are about to face would make the PLF seem like a breeze. Explanations and decisions. The party that the residents of Konomi Islands threw was unlike anything the members of Class 1A had ever seen. Music was filling the air, as well as the smell of exotic foods that the class never experienced before were flowing out of shops and stalls. All free of charge, the residents simply contributing to the banquet that was ongoing. Several residents took a little longer to join the party as they stormed Arlong Park, their bodies filling with adrenaline as they were hellbent on taking back what the pirates had taken from them. Izuku had sent out clones to gather up the remaining fishmen before storing them away in the darkness of the dark fruit, as well as bring the rest of the class together. Oh, thank God! Denki cried with tears in his eyes as he and the rest of his group were the last ones to arrive. The class had found a secluded spot where they could talk in private. Seriously guys, you don't know how scared I was. The lightning user continued to ramble. We suddenly arrived in a place we don't know, and then we're fighting for our lives against a villain. The rest of the class, while not openly as much as Denki, with the exception of Mineta, was still looking equally troubled as Izuku and his clones finished healing them up. Yes, it is quite troubling. I've never heard of this archipelago before. Ida muttered, sounding ashamed at his lack of knowledge. Yes, it's unsettling me as well. Momo admitted, looking deeply troubled. Well, Muscles seem to know what's going on here. May informed, shocking everyone with this information. Yeah, and he seemed to know who the shark guy was too. Mineta added with Fumikage, nodding. Indeed, and he called that shark villain a pirate. The bird-headed boy continued as more and more people were now focused sorely on Izuku. The boy didn't look bothered, merely annoyed at being put on the spot. Well, yeah, of course I know about this world. Where do you think my powers came from? Izuku questioned, causing everyone but May to gasp in shock. Your powers? You mean this is the world that dash? Momo stopped as she saw Izuku nodding in confirmation. This is the world where the powers from the quirk originated from. Izuku confirmed, stunning the crew into silence. However, it was broken when Denki, who had broken out into a cold sweat, spoke, a near hysterical smile on his face as he did. Ha. Good joke, but seriously, where do you think we are? The lightning user questioned, denial clear in his tone as he hoped for a more simple answer. Izuku, however, wasn't laughing as he stared at the boy and those that appeared in similar states such as Mineta and Sato with pity. Sorry to say, but it's the truth. We're not on planet Earth anymore. Hell, the people of this world merely call it Blue Planet. Izuku declared as dread started to creep into everyone's heart. But how is that possible? Toru demanded, the sleeves on her gym outfit flying wildly as she moved her arms. You've got to have an idea, right, Midoriya? If you know everything about this world, then you should know what brought us here. Toru pointed out, and Mina immediately jumped onto that line of thinking. Yeah, and if that's the case, then you should know how to get us back, right? Mina asked hopefully as many of their classmates' eyes lit up with hope at the realization. However, to their dismay, Izuku shook his head, with a troubled look on his face. I don't. He admitted, biting the nail on his thumb in worry. In all my memories of this time PRD, there's nothing that could have brought us here. Izuku admitted before looking at his classmates, a grave look in his eyes. And the only thing that might do the job won't activate for nearly 2 years. Izuku's tone was calm as he explained it, but a few of his more observant classmates picked up the small amounts of panic in his tone. 2 years. Ochako squeaked, tears already welling up in her eyes as the situation seemed to be fully hitting the class. Mineta actually gripped his head in frustration. Great. That's just great. Any other terrible news to share? He demanded rhetorically, only for Izuku's eyes to dart away, causing Mineta to fully break down. Oh, come on. Ida, who had been trying to keep the panic at bay, managed to ask the question. What's wrong, Midoriya? What's got you so concerned? The engine user questioned, with Izuku letting out a tired sigh. You know that orange-haired girl from earlier? He questioned. Yes, the one that hugged you tightly after dealing with that villain. Ida nodded and Izuku twitched at the way Ida described her. Yes, her name's Nami by the way. Izuku confirmed. Anyway, something's wrong with her. Here Izuku paused as he thought for a moment. No, that's not right exactly. It's more akin to she doesn't match up to the memories I have of her. Izuku tired to explain, only getting confused looks from his friends, letting out a breath from his nose. We were steeping through time. I was able to catch a glance at the date. Izuku explained before running his hand through his hair in frustration. If that date is correct, then Nami is a couple of years older than she should be, and she should be on an island miles away from here at the moment. Izuku explained his troubles, and it was Fumikage who spoke next, his eyes wide in realization and alarm. A parallel world. He shouted in alarm with Izuku nodding. My thoughts exactly, a world that closely resembles the world I know but with enough differences that I can't be sure of everything. Izuku explained before clicking his tongue. And it makes my plan to get us home that much more difficult. Izuku admitted before the class exploded in no's. Get us home. You've got a plan. Why didn't you say something before? As more and more of his classmates shouted over each other, Izuku was getting more and more annoyed. Quickly throwing up a calm barrier so they wouldn't be overheard. Quiet. He shouted over all the noise, effectively quieting the class down. Yes, I have a plan to get us home, but it involves that method I mentioned earlier. The one that won't activate for 2 years. Izuku explained before sitting down on a nearby barrel. Take a seat, guys, this might take a while. And it was then that Class 1A learned about the world that they found themselves. A world of oceans, a world of pirates and marines, a world filled with races that would boggle the mind, and of course a world of treasure. The class sat in amazement as they listened, hanging on to every word. Finally Izuku explained about the mythical treasure known as the One Piece. And so for the last 20 years One Piece has been waiting on Laugh Tale, waiting for someone to claim it. Izuku finished his tale before looking at his classmates, who seemed just a tad a bit overwhelmed. That was a lot to take in. Tsuyu muttered, scratching her cheek as she tried to process everything she was just told. Indeed, but how does any of that help us get home? Shoto questioned with Izuku grunting. Because it's the One Piece that's going to get home. If the class was confused before, they were completely lost now, a few of them exchanging looks before glancing user at their class representative. Midoriya, how is some pirate treasure going to help us get back home? Momo felt the need to be the one to ask the question. To his credit, Izuku didn't blink at the sudden question and instead answered honestly. Because amongst the One Piece's treasure is the Holy Grail. To many of the class that didn't add anything except more confusion. How to those like Momo, Ida and Fumikage, who were well versed in prequirk myths, couldn't stop their jaws from dropping. Yup, that Holy Grail, the object that can read the heart of whoever possess it and grant their deepest wish. Izuku confirmed as smiles and cheers erupted from the members of Class 1A. Thank you, Ex Machina. Denki cried as Zero took a step forward and clenched his fist. Yeah, now we just gotta go get it and problem solved. He cheered and would have continued had Izuku suddenly not burst out in laughter, a laughter that caused his body to shake with such force that he was knocked off the barrel he was sitting on. The university students watched with a growing sense of unease as they watched their normally composed class rep laugh uproariously, with even May having enough social sense to know something wasn't quite right. Was it something I said? Hanta asked with a nervous laugh, with Izuku managing to calm himself down, but he still let out an occasional bark of laughter. I'm sorry. He managed to say. But you have no idea how big a cluster F we're about to get ourselves into. Izuku warned them. But why? Mina questioned. You know everything about this world, and even if some things are changed we should be able to manage. The dancer reasoned, with Izuku shaking his head. They just weren't getting. First, the Grail most likely won't be ready to be sued for at least 2 years. That's how it was in the other world. Izuku pointed out, with the class's mood plummeting at that reminder. Still, Ochako was hoping to keep the morale up. Hey, it's not all bad, right? Even if we have to wait 2 years, Midoriya can still go grab the grail and we can keep it safe until it's time, right? She asked hopefully and was soon joined by some of the more optimistic members of the class. Once again their hopes were dashed with Izuku shaking his head. First, I don't even know if it's in the same place. Remember, where there's small changes there could be massive ones as well. Izuku had to point out before growling in frustration. Besides, the moment someone finds it, SHT's really going to hit the fan, so it'll be better if the DMN thing is ready to go when we do get it. Izuku explained, besides the thing's the size of a building and it's unaffected by devil fruit powers, so it's not like we can move it easily. Izuku explained as he was now leaning against the wall. So what's the plan, Muscles? May asked, leaning forward eagerly. You've got an idea to get us home, right? That's why you told those guys we were bounty and treasure hunters? The pink-haired girl questioned with Izuku nodding. Yeah, that's right. He confirmed before doing a sweeping look at his class. Look guys, I have been thinking this over and this is the best solution I can think of. Got it? He asked, getting nods from the class, allowing Izuku to continue. The plan is basic. We set sail to find the One Piece so we can use the Grail to get home. Izuku explained. An obvious and straightforward plan. Ida nodded his head. But why tell them we're bounty and treasure hunters? He questioned with Izuku shrugging. We've got 20 people here and have to make money somehow. Figured through handing in bounties and calming buried treasure should be a stable enough source. Izuku rationalized. Makes sense. Tsuyu muttered before tilting her head. But why not join the Marines then? That way we could get a stable pay and have allies. The frog girl questioned with Izuku raising an eyebrow. If we did that, the training could take years. Not to mention we would without a doubt be separated, and even if we got through all of that, there's no telling everyone would be stationed in the New World or even the Grand Line. New World. Grand Line. You mean the other half of the planet, right? Mizo asked, remembering what Izuku said about the geography of the planet as the class rep nodded. Yeah, that's where the One Piece should be, Izuku explained. And it's not like we can just go to the government with this. Best case scenario is that they think we're just a bunch of brats messing around, worst case they might see us as pirates and we're labeled criminals on the spot. Izuku cautioned. No, it's best we just handle this on our own. Agreed. Shoto nodded his head. With Midoriya's knowledge we can use events to our benefit, and as long as we don't commit any villainous acts we can lay low as we head towards the One Piece with no one being the wiser until it's too late. The two-tone team voiced his agreement. Not to mention the added bonus of extra training. Fumikage added on. We thought we only had a couple of months before we headed off to war, but now we've given about 2 additional years to train and get better. Not to mention gaining extra combat experience when we fight against the criminals we're looking to turn in. The bird-headed boy was kinda looking forward to this. Not to mention all the babies I can make. May gushed, her body shaking from excitement as she envisioned everything she can make in the span of 2 years, especially without power loader's constant nagging. Well, looks like we've got our plan. Kirishima grinned, pounding his fist together. He didn't exactly like the idea of handing over bad guys for money, but he even could understand the necessity of it. Yup, we go on a 2-year cruise, beat up some bad guys and then go home. Mina cheered, which was soon joined in her cheering by Ochako and Denki. Most of the students watched them with smiles as they felt some of the tension leaving them. However, Ida looked over to Izuku, who still looked troubled. What's wrong, Midoriya? The speedster questioned, and Izuku took a deep breath. There are a few more things we need to discuss. First, this world is dangerous, a lot more dangerous than ours. From the weather to those living here, the two worlds simply can't be compared. Izuku had to caution his friends. No kidding. Zero muttered while scratching the back of his head. With guys like those Arlong pirates running around, we need to be careful. He grimaced as he recalled the encounter he had with Chu. Izuku, however, just gave Zero a pitying look. Zero, the people we're going to go up against could wipe the Arlong pirates as well as this whole collection of islands off the map single-handedly. A heavy silence covered the group as they broke out into a cold sweat. That's discouraging. Jiraiya finally managed to say, looking just as calmly as the rest of the students. Izuku nodded. Looks like you're starting to understand what we're up against. Izuku nodded, glad they're finally understanding before smiling. Lucky for you we won't run into those guys for a while, which will give us plenty of time to prepare for them. Izuku spoke reassuringly to his friends, who all let out a collective sigh of relief. Next is that while the Marines are touted as heroes here, let me be clear, they are not. Izuku warned, his eyes narrowing dangerously. At least in the way you're familiar with. Izuku continued. The Marines are more like those from our world, soldiers that work for the government. Sure, they'll arrest criminals and haul them off to prison, but they won't think twice about taking a life if it means going home to their family. Remember, for the most part these are just regular men and women doing what they needed to do to survive. Izuku's words struck a chord in the hearts of some of his classmates. Despite being university student, their hero classes and their time in the field, a few of them still had that naive, childish part of their heart where the world was black and white. They knew it wasn't right, that the soldiers had no way of knowing or doing things the way the hero course students had seen and been taught, but the idea of allying or at least cooperating to some extent men and women who could kill so easily was something that would take some getting used to. And finally, Izuku's voice took on a tone of hesitation and uncertainty, as if he was debating even bringing it up before finding his resolve and continuing. If you're up for it and willing to take a monumental risk, then we could end up saving this world. Izuku proposed, shocking the class. Save the world. Ochako cried in alarm, being the first one to recover. Yes, save the world. Earlier I left out a few details about what's going on in this world. Let me finish it now. Izuku vowed. And that's when the class learned of the rulers of the world, the celestial dragons. Became aware of their cruelty and why they could get away with such acts. The green-haired boy told them of the god knights and the 5 elders that oversaw everything. And at the center of it all they learned of the one called Imu, the true ruler of the blue planet, and a being of such evil they made AFO look like a petty crook. More than once the class wanted to interrupt either an exclamation or ask a question, but Izuku pushed on, not giving them a chance. When he was finally done, the class was speechless and more than a few were shaking from what they were just told. Izuku studied their reactions calmly as he retook his seat on the barrel before breathing out through his nose and reaching into his pocket and bringing out a pack of cigarettes. It's a lot, I know. Izuku muttered, with placing one in his mouth before lighting it before taking a puff. But it's the truth. He muttered disdainfully as he glanced at the stick in his mouth. A habit he had picked out since the Yakuza raid whenever he was feeling stressed. That's an understatement. Yuga muttered, looking more terrified than they had ever seen him. It was easy to see that all of them had felt that way. Hell, Ida wasn't even admonishing Izuku for smoking as he normally did, his mind was clearly elsewhere. Izuku took a moment to take another drag of his cigarette. This is why I said this was optional. This isn't just some third-rate criminal organization we can take down. These are the rulers of the planet with the power and authority to back it up. If we choose to go down this path, we're going up against all of that, all the while having to deal with that and the consequences that follow. Izuku continued to warn his classmates. Consequences. Toru squeaked and Izuku had to shake his head at their naivete. We would be actively and willing going up against the government. If we do this, we will become criminals. Not if, when. Izuku wasn't willing to sugarcoat this. He had to make sure his classmates understood what they would be getting into. WWL, why don't we use the Grail to go home and then bringing back reinforcements? Mineta suggested. We could gather information and proof and then lead an army of heroes against these BSTRDS. To most of the class the suggestion was quite reasonable and even preferable, however Izuku didn't even let them voice their agreement when he shook his head. Not happening. We either end this ourselves or do nothing. Izuku coldly informed them, only further frustrating them all. But why? Ochako nearly cried, hating that the only choices they had were awful ones. Why do we have to go into this alone? She said, tears starting to well up in her eyes as some of their classmates moved to comfort her. Izuku said nothing at first, merely finished off his cigarette before burning away the butt to nothing before addressing the question. I have 2 reasons for this actually. Izuku answered the gravity girl, who blinked. The first is that there is no way in hell I'm going to risk Imo learning about Earth. Izuku revealed to his classmates, who adopted confused looks. Look, I have no idea what will happen if we succeeded and get to the Grail, or what kind of after effect whatever the Grail does will have. It could be nothing but give us the ability to move back and forth between the 2 worlds, and well, or it could permanently open a rift connecting the 2 worlds, and the last thing we need is Imo coming over to our world, which again is significantly weaker than the one we currently find ourselves in. Izuku felt the need to remind them before continuing on. The second reason is because that unless they know a certain technique, one that I plan to teach of you anyway, then there's no way for anyone to be of any help. Izuku offered, with Shoto leaning forward. A technique? He asked, interested. Yeah, one that's commonplace in the new world where the One Piece is located. Izuku explained. It's called Haki, I've mentioned it. Some of the class nodded, having heard Izuku mention it before. That technique is the only surefire way of hurt Imo and his cronies. Teaching it to the 20 of you will be hard enough, never mind an army of heroes. Izuku reasoned before shaking his head. Despite how crazy it sounds. If we do decided to go after Imo, then it would be better to do it ourselves. And with that last statement, silence covered the class, as each person ran the pros and cons through their heads, each wanting to help but unsure if they really could. Eventually Mina felt she needed to speak up with a question. Hey Midori, in the other world, did anyone stop this creep? The alien-loving girl questioned, with Izuku letting out a troubled grunt. Yeah, in fact they go down in about 2 years. Well then why are you considering this? Denki questioned, looking both confused and terrified. What? Do you think there's chance that things will be different here? Like our presence here has already effed something up? Denki questioned rhetorically, only for Izuku to stare deadpanned at him, causing him to cry. Oh come on. Nami, despite how she appears, was essential to saving the world in the other timeline, but the process on how she got there has already been changed with our arrival. Hell, it was different before we even got here. Izuku explained. And where there was one change, there could be hundreds. Momo finished grimily. The best case scenario was that this was the only change and it would be corrected later, and the worst is that this world could already be doomed. The heiress said, her tone showing her understanding of just how grim this situation is. Nodding, Izuku continued. So what do all want to do? Focus on getting home and ignoring the government the best we can? Or do we put everything in the line and try and save this world? Izuku questioned before making eye contact with each of his fiends and classmates. Remember, no matter what happens or what we chose, it all ends in about 2 years. The class was silent, trying to get a feel from what the others were thinking by the look in their eyes. 2 years of fighting either for themselves or a world they do not know. They would be putting their lives on the line regardless of what they choose, but could they truly risk their lives, their freedom, and their chance to get home for a world that will label them as villains for trying to save them? Could they really put themselves through it? Let's do it. Shoto's reply had no doubts in it as he stood firm, as fist clenched in determination, a fire burning in both his eyes. If there's a chance we can save this world, then we should take it. The two-toned boy declared. That's the spurt. Mei shouted, a wide grin of her face as she bounced in place. I'm not sure I'm feeling everything you hero student are, but from what I understand the people in charge here are stagnating this world, and that's unforgivable. I'll help in any way I can. This world is cruel and filled with prejudice and slavery. Koji Koda nearly cried, sounding terrified and angry. How can we call ourselves heroes if we just turned our back on them? Koji said, tears of frustration filling his eyes that he quickly wiped away. We couldn't. Tsuyu answered, surprising them. I know I'm one of the biggest sticklers for the rules back home, but we're not at home, we need to learn to adapt. Besides, this situation is worse than anything we've ever experienced. We can't exactly stick to training we've been given. One by one the spirits of the hero course students rose as their resolve hardened, as did their determination and heroic spirits. Let's save this world. The people need our help. Let's bring down Emu and all the other stupid villains. Show everyone what heroes are made of. As the students made their declarations, Izuku watched on with a smirk as Ida and Momo approached. Well, it appears everyone's on board with saving the world. Ida muttered, and even though he had a troubled look on his face, there wasn't a hint of doubt in his voice. Momo nodded, her own smile firmly in place. I take it you already have a plan set in mind for moving forward. Izuku's response was to smirk and nod. I've got a tiny bit more to tell you all, but that's right. Izuku confirmed before his smirk turned particularly nasty. And it all starts with catching a rat. Line break. The next couple of days were a non-stop party for the people of the Konomi Islands as they ate, drank, danced, and just reviled in the fact they were alive. Finally, after 8 years of struggling to survive, to meet the demands of a madman who's taken countless lives, of just existing but not living, the people of Konomi Islands could finally live again. The UA students were enjoying the party just as much. As worried as they were for the future as well as scope of what they were about to set out to do, the students allowed themselves this light reprieve to simply enjoy themselves. True, they had to deflect some questions about where they came from, but after telling the people that they all came from the same island where people with powers were normal, most of the islanders were satisfied and left it at that. Though they still did need to think of a proper cover story before the government got too suspicious. Still, the kids were able to enjoy themselves. The food was amazing and only enhanced by the festive air and the smell of the ocean as they swayed back and forth to the music. More of the social members of the group were socializing with the locals, laughing and trading stories. The townspeople who owned clothing stores were also more than generous enough to the students a few sets of clothes each after learning that all they had to wear were the clothes on their backs, despite the protest from the students. Mizo did have some trouble given his resemblance to the fishman and kept a respectful distance. Not that the masked young man could blame them, considering the people had basically been enslaved for the last 10 years. It wasn't all bad thought, the children young enough not to understand prejudice and those old enough to see past any concerns were happy to chat with the young men. The young ones marveling at his appearance and quirk, while the elders stoked anyone who wanted to separate them. Sometime during the party Izuku had disappeared for a bit of time before coming back with a smile that resembled the cat that got the canary before going back the party. Most of his time was spent mingling with the townspeople, more especially Nami, Genzo, Neko and Nami's sister Nojiko, who broke down crying much like her sister when she saw the fate of their tormentors. It was during this time through the party that the UA students learned what's been happening these last 10 years and the living hell they've been forced through. Needless to say, Class 1A was infuriated at what they had learned, and more than a few wished they had hit the fishmen harder. Even Izuku, who knew the story from dozens of different perspectives, grew angry just by hearing it again. He managed to contain his rage for now, however, knowing the perfect outlet would be there soon. Line break. It was during the third day of the party when things started to die down that it happened. 2 islanders who were walking past the coast spotted a marine ship dock as a group of marines stepped off the ship. The lead marine was a slim, dark-haired man with, appropriately for his name, a strongly mouse-like appearance. His eyes are constantly narrowed, while his facial hair consists of a thin goatee and 6 long, wire-like whiskers on his upper lip. His marine uniform is heavily customized, with the standard cap converted into a mouse-eared cowl, connected to a buttoned-up greatcoat that reaches to his feet, accessorized with a belt and blue epaulets. The man's smile reeked with greed and arrogance as he approached the islanders. I am Captain Izumi of Marine Branch 16, and I'm here to investigate some troubling rumors that have reached us. The Marine captain introduced himself as the 2 islanders looked at each other. Rumors. One questioned his buddy. Think he's talking about Arlong? He questioned, getting a nod. Probably. Now that he's gone, the BSTRD can't exactly keep information from getting out. Gone. Nezumi blinked. What the hell do they mean gone? Did that stupid fish pack it up and leave without telling me? He thought incredulously as rage started to build as he barely managed to keep it from showing on his face. Arlong, you say? He managed to ask with a strained smile. You mean that fishman pirate from the Grand Line? The corrupt marine knew he had to blame dumb. It if ever got out B had been in league with the pirate, death would be a mercy. The two islanders nodded. Yeah, he's been terrorizing and ruling this island for years. One of the two snarled, hatred burning in his eyes before taking a deep breath after his friend placed a comforting hand on his back as a vindictive smile crossed his face. But that's over now, we're finally free. He exclaimed in jubilation, not noticing the panicked looks coming from the Marines as his friend continued. Yeah, a group of young bounty hunters appeared out of nowhere and took those DMN pirates down like they were nothing. The Marines were frozen now, bought hand shock and horror. Arlong was defeated, all that money they were receiving from him, the high-class lifestyle and all the perks that came with it, all of that was gone now. What was worse was that now that Arlong beaten, he had no reason to keep his mouth shut about their dealings. Of course most wouldn't believe the words of a pirate, especially since he was just a lousy fishman, but all it would take would be for one suspicious officer to stick their nose where it didn't belong and it would be over for them. I'll have to work fast. The rat-themed officer thought, his mind working frantically. I'll destroy all documents and piece of evidence that links me to this. Nezumi thought. The only reason he kept them was so he could have blackmail material in case any one of the officers he brought into this caught CLD feet and wanted to back out. But first he needed to find the bounty hunters and convince them to hand over Arlong and the rest of his crew without the bounty or reporting it. That money and fame would be better in his hands after all, not some lowly bounty hunters. And if they refuse? Well, he could always just slap a bounty on them and label them as criminals, wouldn't be the first time nor would it be the last. Managing to put on a friendly smile, Nezumi spoke. That's wonderful to hear. He spoke with false enthusiasm. I would love to meet these youngsters to offer them my congratulations as well as speak with them about collecting the reward. The man said, lying through his teeth. The two islanders, however, had no way to know of his true intentions and nodded. No problem, the first one said happily as he turned along with his friend. Yeah, we can take you right to them. The second one promised as both started leading the group into the islands. None of them noticed the unattended ship being boarded. Line break, Izuku saw them coming from the time they docked, having picked them up on with his hockey first, before keeping taps on the Marines as they made their way into town. This was it, the first real test and the first instance if done wrong that could get them labeled as criminals. True, it wasn't going to be that hard to get over this, but Izuku had to be cautious nonetheless. Straightening up, Izuku was happy to see his classmates, at least the ones that could see him, grew just a tad bit tense while still maintaining their calm demeanors just as the Marines arrived. Izuku's stomach churned in disgust at the mere sight of the man in front of him, but he managed to fight down the bile as the rat-themed Marine marched forward. Greetings, I am Nezumi, captain of East Blue's 16th Marine Branch. The man said as he extended his arm while introducing himself as Izuku stood and grasped his hand. Izuku Midoriya, leader of this little band bounty hunters, he said, giving the man's hand a little extra of a squeeze. While enjoying the flinch that came from the man. A pleasure. He squeaked while cradling his hand when the boy realized it. Anyway, I'm here to discuss what to do with the pirate you and your crew captured. Nezumi informed, actually sounding like a professional to those who didn't know better. Oh, and what do you need to discuss with me? Izuku said with a grin before he gestured to the surrounding townspeople who were listening in. I'm sure the people of these islands have a lot to say than I do. Izuku told them with several shouts of agreement. DMN, right, we do. Neko shouted. Those monsters tormented us for years and we want to make sure they pay for everything they did. The doctor shouted, only adding to the rage of the townspeople. Yeah, in fact one of the first people they killed was one of the only one people to stand up to her. Her name was Belmir, a former Marine. Nojiko shouted out in rage at what they did to her adopted mother. Her hope was that knowledge would push the Marines to be harsher on the pirates than they would originally. Genzo nodded enthusiastically. Yeah, they put so much fear and pressure into an 8-year-old girl that she thought the only way to save us was to agree to an insane deal that they would never go through with. The mayor of the town spat in disgust while nearby Nami flinched. In her heart she always knew that Arlong would never truly let her go, but in her desperation she continued down her path. The more Nezumi heard, the more pronounced the sneer on his face became. However, instead of it being directed at the thoughts and accusations that were being thrown towards the pirates, it was levied towards the townspeople themselves. It's what you miserable urchins get for being such easy money, he thought while clenching his fist in annoyance. Still, he managed to turn that into a look of sadness and concern. What a horrible set of circumstances, he dramatically cried, putting on an act. If only I knew sooner, I could have helped you poor people. He continued to lament, fooling most of the islanders, but Nami and the hero students narrowed their eyes at his sadness. But you can all rest assured, I will take these monsters directly to Navy HQ so they can be punished to the fullest extent to the law, he swore, basking in the cheers and praise that came from the townspeople. Thanks, but that's not necessary. Nezumi came to halt as his head slowly turned towards Izuku, who backed to sitting down and leaning back. I'm sorry, but what did you say? The Marine captain questioned, with Izuku giving off a lazy smile. I said there's no need for you to do that. We're going to drop Arlong and his crew off in Logue Town where they can be held until someone can grab them, Izuku explained as Nezumi grit his teeth. I assure you, if it's a matter of my abilities, I assure you I am more than capable of handling it myself, Nizu told the little brat in front of him, who kept that DMN smile on his face. Oh, I don't doubt your skill at all, Captain. It's simply taking them to Logue Town is more convenient to everyone, not to mention it would be easier to get the reward for the 3 bounties there as well. Nezumi growled as he couldn't think up of way to refute that logic. So instead he focused on something else. 3 bounties. I'm pretty sure that the Arlong pirates 4 active bounties on the crew, Nezumi noted, with Izuku raising an eyebrow. Well informed, aren't you? Izuku questioned, causing Nezumi to flinch at the mess up. There wasn't any reason for him to know exactly how many active bounties a pirate crew that he should just be learning about had. Lucky for the captain, the green-haired kid moved on. But you're right, the Arlong pirates did have 4 active bounties, but unfortunately one got away, Izuku told them, with Nezumi's eyes widened in panic. One of them got away. DMN it all, now we're going to have to track them down and silence them before they can talk. First things first, through, Nezumi had to deal with the pirates he could get to first. If that's the case, then may I see the pirates to make sure they can be easily transported, Nezumi requested, hoping he could be left alone with the pirates long enough to silence them. It would look suspicious. Yes, but all he would have to say is that the pirates tried to escape and he would be justified. And luckily the boy didn't seem to have a problem with that as he stood. If you insist, Izuku muttered, and Nezumi's grin widened as he prepared to follow the young idiot. Except the boy didn't move, not instead. Nezumi and his marines jumped back in fear as a black smog started to emit from Izuku, both from his back and feet. Devil fruit powers, the captain thought in terror, which only grew as the multiple bodies of the fishmen started to emerge from the darkness. Only their heads were relished, but all of them were groaning or whimpering in absolute agony. The Marines started to tremble at the sight, especially when they saw the cruel and unforgiving smiles on the faces of the residents there. The orange-haired girl's smile was practically splitting her face. Nezumi, however, despite the terror he was feeling, managed to take stock of who he was seeing. Kurobi worth 9 million berry, Chu worth 5,500,000 berry, and Arlong the Saw worth 20 million berry, in total worth 34,500,000 berry, with the 8 million berry Hatchan being the one that's missing, he thought before refocusing on Izuku. So it seems you did manage to catch the Arlong pirates. Though I do have to question if they'll survive in there long enough to make it to Logue Town. You know the government will take off 30% of the bounty if they're dead, right? Nezumi remained the young man before stepping back as one of the foot solders made a silent plea for help. A moment later, however, the Arlong pirates were pulled back into the darkness, which withdrew back into Izuku. Not to worry, being trapped in the darkness might leave them broken both physically and mentally, but it'll keep them alive. Izuku informed the rat, who smirked cruelly at the news. Oh, is that so? He questioned, seeing his freedom and safety secured. Well then, if that's the case, I don't see any reason to question you any further. Izuku smiled in gratitude. My thanks for your concern, but before you depart I just want to tell you we'll be taking Arlong's ship since ours got sunk. Izuku told the marine, who clicked his tongue in disinterest. Yes, very well, he muttered, rolling his eyes, wanting nothing more to get back to his ship and start his hunt for the octopus. Anything else before I go? He questioned, already turning to leave. Well, actually yes, there is one more thing. Izuku admitted, with Nezumi rolling his eyes. And that would be? He questioned, already walking away. Oh, just the fact that you've been working with Arlong for these last few years. Nezumarch suddenly stoked, much like he feared his heart would at those words. The world and all the noise fading away as he remained frozen in place. Vaguely he could register that panicked looks on the faces of his men, the horrified looks of the townspeople that were frantically whispering to each other as anger started to appear on the islanders' faces while the bounty hunters slowly started to close in on them. Turning around, he saw the boy standing there, a smile that would put the devil to shame, a journal in his hands. What, gonna try and deny it? Izuku questioned while waving around the journal in his hands. Sorry to say, but Arlong's already ratted you out. Izuku said, tossing the journal over to Genzo, who instantly started to flip through it, growing angrier and angrier the more he read. He's right. The mayor practically snarled as he passed the book around. You've been taking bribes from that BSTRD for years while ignoring the hell we've been living in. The man was practically spitting fire at this point. The Marines were close to panicking and gripping their weapons tightly, ready to use them in a moment's notice. Nezumi was shaking in both fear and rage as he turned back towards Izuku, who smirked. Surprised. Found that while digging through the remains of Arlong Park after it was looted and burnt down. Izuku explained while taking a step forward, with Nezumi taking a step back. What's wrong? Izuku questioned, truly enjoying the squirming the man was doing with the man spitting. What's wrong? I'm being accused of treason by a bunch of brats who believed anything they read. Nezumi shouted, desperately trying to find a way to save himself. Izuku kept his smile. Understandable, and you're right, something like this shouldn't be believed simply on the word of a pirate. Izuku admitted before just as picked something up with his haki. So we'll use your words as well. Just when Nezumi was about to demand what he meant by that, there was a shout. Guys, we got it. Turning, everyone saw Mina, Toru, Shoji and Tsuyu rushing towards them. As they got closer, they could see what everyone was holding. Shoji was carrying two different kind of transponder snails. A regular one and one that takes pictures and sends them to others, while the girls were carrying various folders and books. Nezumi recognized the books instantly. Those are my log books. He screamed, turning furiously towards Izuku. Those brats broke into my office on my ship. He accused, with Izuku shrugging. Like you said, no one would believe the words of a pirate, so we'll be using yours as well. Izuku explained, now standing. So you gonna come quietly, Captain, or are we going to have to get a little violent? Nezumi, knowing the gig was up, saw only one possible option. Men kill everyone here. As long as they die, we can dash. A force unlike they had ever felt before blanketed the area. The ground in the area cracked and broke apart, wood splintered and snapped as more than a few trees were blown away. The townspeople and UA students, while feeling some strain, it was manageable. For the Marines, however, it was crushing, knocking most unconscious in an instant, and the few that didn't were instantly slammed into the ground. As Izuku released his haki, darkness once more flowed from beneath his feet as hands made of darkness reached out and dragged the Marines into the darkness, the conscious ones screaming. The only one remaining was a quivering and trembling Nezumi. Why you can't do this? I'll have you hunted down like dogs. He threatened with Izuku rolling his eyes. You're about to have a lot more to worry about than us. Izuku warned the captain before facing his fiends. You find everything? He asked, getting nods from the everything was exactly where you said it was Midoriya, and the code to the safe was correct as well. Mizo confirmed, only further Nozumi's panic as Izuku rubbed his hands together in anticipation. Perfect, put down the snails so we can get this party started. He grinned before turning to the townspeople. You people ready to see what really justice looks like? He questioned, with the islanders looking confused but hopeful, nodding their heads as his classmates placed the snails down while handing him the files, which he looked through until he found what he's looking for. It's the same. He thought, reading over the snail number he found before leaning down and punching in the number. For several seconds the transponder snail rang, the tension building, until finally the snail, having grown a gray goatee, let out a bored yawn as an old man's voice sounded through it, with the snail looking incredibly bored. Vice Admiral Garp speaking, who the hell is this and who'd you get this number? The now named Garp questioned as the villagers gasped in awe and Nozumi squealing in fear. Vice Admiral Garp, my name is Izuku Midoriya, and unfortunately I've got to report that I've discovered both corruption and marines conspiring with pirates. Izuku informed the hero, who suddenly went silent as the snail's face lost all trace of boredom and appeared to be made of stone. What? He questioned simply, but that one word was filled with such coldness and hatred that many of the listeners felt chilled to the bone. Izuku managed to keep his own nerves down as he answered. It's true, sir, allow me to explain. From there Izuku explained what's been happening on the island. Explaining how the fishmen arrived and took over. After explaining the basics, however, Izuku let the townspeople explain exactly what they had been put through. The taxes, the ban of weapons, and not being allowed to leave. As more and more of the explanation went on, it was clear Garp was getting angrier and angrier. The old man had nearly lost it when he heard about what happened. Belmir, who he was informed was a former marine, and what Nami was put through. Once that was done, Izuku took over, giving the man a modified story of how he and his classmates had arrived on the island after their ship had been sunk to cash in on Arlong's bounty. Luckily they had someone from each of the 4 groups, so nothing had been left out. By the end Garp had an impressed grin on the snail's face. Not bad. Brats, you ever think about joining the Marines? He questioned. Thanks for the offer, but the Marines are a little too restrictive for our taste. Izuku rejected the offer before shooting Nozumi an ugly look. Not to mention Captain Nozumi of Branch 16 has soured the Marines a bit in my eyes. He explained, with the old man growling. Nozumi, huh, that's his name? Garp questioned, his previous good mood gone. Yes sir, after raiding Arlong's base and finding some documents naming Captain Nozumi several times, I became suspicious, and once he arrived on the island just a couple of days after Arlong's defeat, I knew something was up. So while the captain and his men were heading our way, I sent some of my crew mates to infiltrate his ship for proof of dealings with Arlong. We were not disappointed. I've got a projection snail here that can send those documents over now if you wish. Please do. Garp growled but did nothing else as one by one Izuku showed the projection sail the papers, its eyes copying the documents and transferred over. Garp read them all in silence, far longer than anyone expected. Many had actually thought he walked away, either to inform someone else or take a breath. They couldn't be sure, so many of them jumped when his voice once more came over the snail. Captain Nozumi. Can you hear me? Garp spoke, sounding far too calm for the situation, and it only filled the corrupt captain with more fear. The only time Garp was this quiet was when he was very angry. So with a trembling lip he answered. Why yes sir. He cried, tears and snot running down his face. Good, now listen carefully. Garp growled. You and the rest of those worthless, arrogant and greedy pieces of SHT that make up the 16th branch are fired. Garp finally exploded, his rage no longer being able to be contained. I'll see to it you and the rest of your BSTRDS are punished and made to suffer for every ACT of cruelty you let the people of that island suffer through. You and those DMN pirates you coupled up with will be thrown into the smallest, dingiest, and broken down cell impelled down has to Ophir. Sir, please don't dash. Nezumi begged, only for Garp to interrupt. Shut it. You think you have a right to ask for anything after the stunt you pulled? The right to is a swift death, and I'm be doing everything in power to make sure it's as slow and painful as possible. Garp finally took several deep breaths. Oi kid, you said you had a way to keep Arlong and the rest of his crew locked down until you reached Logue Town. He questioned. Yes sir, that's right. Izuku answered, having told Garp about his plans for the fishmen. Then if it's not too much trouble, could you take the rat and the goons he brought with him along with you? I'll pick them up along with the rest of the traders. Garp promised, getting a blink from Izuku. You're coming to the east, sir? He questioned, with the snail giving a nod. Yeah, this happened in my backyard and I didn't know a thing about it. I've gotten a little too careless these days. That's gonna have to change. Garp grumbled. Of course sir, and yes, I'd be happy to hand Nezumi over to the captain in Lougetown. Heard he's pretty accomplished. Getting a satisfied grunt from Garp. Thanks, I'll make sure they know you're coming so there's no trouble with the handover. Thank you sir, and before you go I have one small favor to ask. Izuku aid, getting a hum from Garp. Would you mind if I kept Nezumi's ship? I got plans for both it and Arlong's ship. Izuku requested. Yeah sure, no problem. Garp agreed instantly, going back to his relaxed, bored tone. It's just a standard marine ship, so it's no loss, and if anyone asks, just say you got it from me for exposing Nezumi. Garp told the team. Thank you sir. I'm grateful. Izuku told the man, who rolled his eyes. Don't worry about it, and good luck with the bounty hunting. Garp said before the snail gave an amused smirk. If Arlong is your opening act, I can't wait to see what you do next. The line went dead after that, with Izuku putting down the receiver and walked slowly over to Nezumi, relishing the look of panic in the man's eyes. Well, do you know what happens now, Captain? Izuku questioned. Yo, you're going to throw me into the darkness? Nezumi nearly cried. To his relief, however, Izuku shook his head. Not yet. First, I think someone here owes you some payback. Izuku informed before looking over his shoulder. What do you say, Nami? Izuku called. You didn't get a chance to get Arlong a bedding, but how about the sniveling rat who helped him for all these years? Izuku offered the orange-haired girl, whose face was one of shock before it became a delish smile. As Nezumi watched the orange-haired girl approach, one couldn't blame him for mistaking her for a demon, given her smile, nor mistook the cracking of her knuckles for the ringing of his funeral bells. Line break. Hours later, the UA students were relaxing in Nami's and Nojiko's home along with Genzo and Neko, and despite the tight fit, everyone was relaxing soundly. Genzo, looking out the window, chuckled as he could still hear the last of the party-goers give their last hurrahs. To be young and free again. He muttered a sad but nostalgic smile on his face while Neko enjoyed a tangerine. So you kids ready for tomorrow? The doctor questioned, popping a piece of the fruit into his mouth. Yeah, between Arlong and Nezumi there's more than enough supplies to get us through to the next island. Izuku told the doctor. I've got them all sealed away safely. Once I take care of the ships tomorrow, we'll be able to set sail bright and early. What are you going to do with those ships? Noiko asked. Sure, you've got a big crew, but it won't be easy to manage them both. She pointed them out as Izuku took a sip of his tangerine juice. That's a surprise, Ms. Nojiko, but a sunrise worth waiting for. Izuku promised. So we're heading straight for that Lougetown place, right? Jairu asked, as she and everyone that hadn't been there been caught up on what happened. However, Izuku denied that plan. No, we've got one stop to make first. One that can net us nearly 40 million berry. The Trump Pirates, lead by Bear King. The crew might be made of a bunch of smaller Krees, but each member is pretty weak, meaning that it should good practice at fighting a high number of opponents. Once that's done, we'll head to Lougetown, do what we need to do before heading for the Grand Line. Ah yeah, that's what I like to hear. Bring it, Bear King. Kirishima shouted, feeling pumped for a fight. Oh, excited then, Kirishima. Izuku questioned with the red-headed nodding instantly. Of course man, this'll be my first fight as a bounty hunter after all. He told his class rep who gave a happy smile. That's good to hear Kirishima, you're the one who's going to be fighting him after all. Izuku told his friend whose eyes widen in surprise. Wait, I'm fighting, but why would? He questioned only for Izuku to raise his hand. Bear King's devil fruit is the hard fruit, a power that enables him to harden and heat up his body. Izuku informed with Ijiro's eyes widening further. Trust me Kirishima, there's no one better suited for your first opponent than this guy. The redhead was running the words through his head on a loop before looking around and taking in the supportive looks of his classmates. He couldn't help the grin that appeared as he gave a thumbs up. Leave it to me bro, I show Bear King how a real man fights. The hardening user promised. Satisfied, Izuku turned to his classmates. Denki, Tokoyami, Dark Shadow, Sato, Aoyama, the 5 of you will be dealing with Bear King's officers, got it? He questioned with the 4 quickly giving their confirmation. Leave it to us dude. Consider it done. Yeah, we'll give them a beating of a lifetime. Those JRKS won't know what hit them. Another great chance for us to sparkle and dazzle. The rest of us will handle their foot soldiers. There might be a lot of them, but they're nothing special, and once they see their bosses go down they'll scatter to the winds. Izuku promised with a smirk as he clenched his fist. When this is all over and we hand over Arlong's crew along with Bear King's, we're going to be looking at over 70 million berry. More than enough to prepare for the Grand Line. The Grand Line. Genzo muttered under his breath. So you're really heading there? He asked, getting a nod from the UA students. It's the place with the greatest bounties in the world as well as the greatest treasure in the world. Izuku explained what the for Eastern natives, gulping. The One Piece. Nami muttered in near reverence, yup, no one ever said you had to be a pirate to claim it. So we'll prove to be the greatest treasure hunters by claiming the One Piece and prove to be the greatest bounty hunters by calming the heads of the Yonko. Izuku declared. Well, 2 of them anyway. Izuku added mentally, but his audience didn't need to know that. The One Piece and the Yonko. Neko spoke in a whispered disbelief before letting out a near hysterical laugh. You kids really don't aim low, do you? He asked with Nami chuckling. No, they really don't. She agreed before a confident smirk appeared on her face. And I want in. Nami. What are you saying? Neko and Genzo spoke at once while Nojiko laughed openly, while the UA members were shocked by this declaration and looked towards Izuku only to see looked just as lost. The orange-haired girl meanwhile stood demented and gave a cheeky smile. Why so surprised? I've always wanted to make a map of the world, not only that but I'll also be catching pirates and getting paid for it just like Belmere did. Nami explained her reasoning before facing Izuku. What do you say, Captain? I may not be much of a fighter, but there's no one who can navigate the seas like I can. I'll get you wherever you want to go, so what do you say? She questioned. The home was silent as the UA students looked back and forth between the two until finally Izuku spoke. F it. He shrugged before letting a finger as what appeared to be a film reel appeared floating over it. Without another word the film reel shot forward, splitting into 4 before entering each of their heads. Midoriya. Tenya rushed to help them only for Izuku to raise his arm. Relax, I'm only showing them my recent memories. That way they could get a full understanding of what's going on. Izuku explained before sighing. Look, Nami would be an invaluable addition, but I'm not going to let her go into this blind. Izuku told his class firmly just as the film reel ended and the 4 blinked back to reality. Wow. Genzo muttered, having to sit down and removing his hat. I'll say, you kids really are more than you appear. Neko muttered, keeping a particularly close eye on Izuku with the boy scratching the back of his head sheepishly. Yeah, I know it's a lot. He admitted with Nojiko snorting. That's a bit of an understatement. I mean, it's not every day a kid appears, saves you multiple times and then reveals they have memories of everyone who's ever lived. The blue-haired girl let out a chuckle before turning to Nami, who hadn't said anything. Seeing this, Izuku stood and headed for the door as his classmates were quick to follow. However, just before he left, Izuku spoke one more time. "I would love to have you aboard, Nami, and I know what you're capable of, but I'm not going to force you to go up against the entire world right when you've earned your life back. If you still want to join us at the pier tomorrow." Izuku instructed her before heading out the door as the rest of class gave their goodbyes and left, leaving 4 East Blue natives alone with their thoughts. "Lean break, alright, is everyone ready?" Izuku questioned as the UA students stood in front of the 2 ships. "We're ready whenever you are, Midoriya," Momo informed, with Izuku nodding as he placed his hands on the 2 ships. It was then the crew watched the ships under the power of the clank-clank fruit stared to break down and dissemble into countless tiny green objects before swirling around each other before colliding with each other. The class watched in awe as a new shape was formed. It was clearly a ship, but it was much larger than either of the 2 beforehand. It had a dark blue and golden with the deck littered with cannons. The figurehead was that of a simple pole with a massive sail towering over the entrance to the cabin. "Welcome everyone to the Plus Ultra," Izuku said as the crew rushed onto the deck to check out their new ship. "Midoriya, man, this is amazing," Zero told him. "Thanks, and I'll make sure to give you all a thorough tour later," Izuku promised. "It's wonderful, Midoriya, but are you sure we can sail something like this?" Momo asked. "Not everyone is capable of sailing, and I'm worried that it's too much for us to handle," Momo said in concern, only for an orange clay to drop from his arms and fall into the ground before forming into large, humanoid-shaped figures that quickly went to work on the ship. "There are the clay golems, and they're more than capable of helping around the ship," Izuku explained to a happy and relived Momo. "Hey guys," Denki called out while pointing towards the dock. "Look who's here," the lightning user said as everyone looked over to see Nami and Nojiko running over, a suitcase being pulled by Nami, who also had a bag thrown over her shoulder. Behind them were Genzo and Neko, with each of them carrying a potted tangerine tree. "So you decided to join up after all?" Izuku asked. "Yup. Like I said before, if I join up with you I can accomplish my dream and get rich while doing it," Nami announced, her eyes momentarily turning to Barry before she adopted a serious expression. "Besides, you all saved us and gave us back our futures. The least I can do is return the favor by helping you," the orange-haired girl said as she jumped onto the boat along with Nojiko while the men walked up the gangplank. "Even if it means going to war against an ancient evil?" Izuku questioned, and Nami did gulp nervously before steeling her resolve. "Belmere would do the same thing if she were in my shoes. She couldn't stand to see injustice being done," Nami announced as Neko and Genzo placed the tangerine trees. "Without a doubt. She was always rushing into things without thinking," Genzo agreed before looking at the 2 sisters. "But then again, sometimes they usually lead to something great," he muttered softly, causing the girls to blush bright red as they looked away to hide their smiles. "Still, see, you sure you want to do this, Nami?" Genzo asked, his concern for the girl he practically but was unable to do anything to help when it mattered the most. "You just got your life back, take a break, before starting your dream." Genzo wanted to make sure Nami was absolutely sure she wanted to do this. The orange-haired girl was resolved to do this, wanting to finally walk the path she chose for herself. The man nodded in acceptance. "If that's your choice, then I guess I can't stop you," she said, giving the girl a sad but reassuring smile. "Well then, I guess all I can say is please take care of yourself out there," he asked, with the girl tearing up and embracing him in a hug. "I will, Genzo, I promise I will, and come back someday," she vowed, with the man hiding his eyes behind his hate as Neko stepped forward. "Don't be giving these youngsters too much trouble, you hear? They don't seem as patient as we are," he joked, getting a snort from the woman as she crouched down and gave the man a hug. "I'll keep that in mind. And thanks for the help earlier," she laughed as she gestured to her bandaged shoulder. The man just laughed and wiped his eyes. "It's the least I could do," he muttered as he moved over to the side, allowing the sisters to talk. Well, guess is it? You're leaving again. Only this time you're leaving on your own terms. Nojiko smirked with her hands on her hips, which Nami retuned while crossing her arms. Yup, and maybe it's time for you to leave as well. That way you can still living vicariously through me. Nami snarked back. And leave the tangerine grooves to Genzo. They'd be dead in a week. The two shared a laugh before Nojiko pulled her in close. Be careful out there, she said gently. We just got our lives back and I don't want to see you throw yours away. The older sister requested. Hey, it's like I told Genzo. I'll be fine and back before you know it. Nami swore while touching a golden bracelet on her arm while Nojiko touched a similar one on her own. With that, the three left the ship right as golems finished preparing the ship, allowing it to cast off. The three Kokoyashi villagers watched the ship leave, waving, with Nami doing the same even as tears flowed down all their faces until the island had disappeared over the horizon. The class watched, not knowing what to do, before watching straighten up and turning around with a smile. Well then, Captain, where to? You said we were hunting Bear King, right? Tell me where he is and I'll get us there. She vowed, getting smiles and cheers from the crew. Izuku gave the woman a grin. Clockwork Island, he answered, watching in amusement as Nami's eyes turned to Beri. You mean the home of the legendary diamond clock? She squealed. I knew joining this crew was a good idea. As the class watched in amusement as Nami ordered around the golems, Izuku faced forward as he watched the sea pass them by. It was happening, though we're undertaking a mission most would think impossible, but Izuku knew they could pull it off. Just you wait, Imu. I'll be there soon to rip you off that throne.